Hey everyone, welcome to Singularity Computers Modding Episode 6. Today we're going to take a look at case mods, and this is going to be the first video in a series which I'm going to be doing as part of this segment. And we're going to start with the basics. Now, I always say that there is two different types of case modding and two different reasons to mod. The first is a case mod to fit a component or to fit more components into the build. The second is a creative mod, a mod purely for aesthetics. So the first one is really where you can start as a beginner case modder because, it can be fairly basic. I mean, don't get me wrong, it can certainly get involved depending on what you're trying to fit into the case. But the whole concept of it, the thinking, the practical thinking is certainly a lot easier as a beginner, whereas once you get into creativity, which really comes down to the individual, it starts to become a lot more complex. It really is quite easy to think, okay, I have this component here, I want to fit it into the case, what do I need to do? But when it comes to being creative and improving the aesthetics of a case or trying to fit a theme, thinking about other people's taste and your taste and how you're going to, make it look, change the aesthetics of it, it really does get quite complex. So the case I have here is the NZXT H440 Razor Edition, and this case is actually for client build 21. And I'm about to do some fairly substantial case mods for client build 21. But first of all, let's take a look at the tools that I'm going to be using here. Now for case modding, there is quite a lot of tools that are needed, but you can do it just with basic tools. Now, first of all, I have a drill here. You can see that my drill is fairly banged up, but it's cordless, does the job. You're also going to need a set of drill bits. It's good to have a good range. I like to use a jigsaw, but you can get away with just using a Dremel. But if you have a jigsaw, it's going to speed things up. So jigsaw, Dremel. I also have some painter's tape here, two different sizes, and this is 3M painter's tape. I certainly recommend 3M. The quality is just far superior to anything else. And I have some paint. Now, I'm not actually going to be using this paint, I'm just using it as an example. I'm going to be painting this case with a spray gun, but what I have here is a primer and a satin black touch-up paint. I'm not going to be painting the whole case, but we'll get into that shortly. Also, the usual safety gear, so glasses, some earmuffs, a mask for the painting and all of that. Now what I'm going to be doing to this case, you can see I have a couple of components here. I have a Hardware Labs Black Ice GTX 360mm radiator, and I have a Bits Power upgrade kit to 50 on a mod top with a D5 and the Bits Power Black Mod Kit. And what I want to do is, I'm going to be mounting this pump and res config onto this radiator with two SingularityComputers ethereal single reservoir mounts. And I want this configuration to fit into the front of this case, because there is a mounting position in the front of this case for a 360mm radiator. So basically the radiator will sit up there like that with the fans in front of it, and you can see that with the reservoir and the fans and the radiator, it's going to come back to about here. Now you can see the problem, the side panel is going to be covering all of that, but I want all of that to be visible, or at least, from here forward, so that you can see the reservoir from the outside of the case when the side panel is installed. This side panel window is too small for that. Not only that, this side panel window is made from smoked acrylic, and I want to change that to clear acrylic. So that's one of the mods that I'm going to be doing, is changing this side panel. We're going to be cutting the side panel window bigger and installing a new clear acrylic side panel. I'm just going to remove that side panel so that I can show you what I need to do internally, because this is where it gets a little bit more involved. I mean, I'm going to take you through modifying the side panel, but that's really the easy part. Looking at the inside here, you can see that we have this section here which is going to be in the way of this mod. And this is actually for the 3.5-inch hard drive bays which slide in from the back. But I've taken a good look at the design of this case, and this can actually be removed without affecting the structural integrity of the design of this case. So that can be removed while still keeping the power supply cover installed. So it's perfect. But how do we remove it? Well, this case is riveted together. So we are going to be drilling out the rivets. And what you need to do, I mean, this is something very, very common that you're going to be doing a lot of, drilling out rivets, because most cases you're going to be modifying are riveted together. So grab a drill bit that is, well, a fair bit smaller than the rivet, because the hole is going to be quite small. You're better off playing it safe. 3.5mm drill bit, and this is pretty much the average rivet size here. I'm now going to dismantle the case, remove all of the outer panels so that we can get access to the internals. And as I said, I've already taken a look, and I know this mod is possible because I know the design of this case. But just to take you through the thought process, to see if the mod is possible, to see what can be removed from the case, that's what we're going to do now. As I'm stripping this case down, I'm starting to like it more and more. Normally, the front I/O is always attached to the outer panels, which is really a bad idea, because when you go to remove them, it takes the connectivity with it, all of the wiring. It's just seriously annoying. But you can see with this case, it's attached to the inner chassis. I mean, that is just brilliant. Same with the power and reset buttons. So I really, really like this. I hope to see it a lot more. Great job, NZXT. I love this little case. So the first thing we need to look at here, we already know this mod is possible because, I mean, it's easy to see. We've got a 360mm radiator mounting position on the front here. We know a 360mm radiator fits there. We know that the pump and reservoir config is a little bit shorter than that 360mm radiator, so we know that that fits. Let's take a look at the motherboard and graphics cards to see how far forward they're going to come in the build and make sure that they're not going to interfere with our mods. So this is a standard ATX motherboard, and you can see that the motherboard comes about 5mm past the mounting hole. Now these graphics cards measure at 260mm long, which means that they're actually going to come a good 25mm past the edge of the motherboard. Now if the mods you are doing are very complex, then you need to test fit. You need to test fit before and after, sometimes many times. But we're doing fairly basic mods here, so I'm not going to test fit. We've measured the motherboard and graphics cards, and we know that the motherboard is going to come about 5mm past the mount just there. But the graphics cards are going to go about 25mm, so they're actually going to go to the front edge here of the cable routing hole. But that's okay, because we need to use all of this for cable routing anyway, to route the 24-pin, all of the PCIe. So that means that we can only come to, and you know, I'm just doing this roughly. So if we take a look at that there, we have about 5mm. That's where it needs to come to there. That's about as far as we can go. So if I measure that, it's roughly 140 millimeters, 145. So let's now measure our fan. We know that's 25 millimeters, it's a standard size. Plus the radiator is 80 millimeters because it's a 54 millimeter thick radiator. And I've just set the pump and res config about 10 millimeters off the radiator because that's approximately how far the SingularityComputers ethereal reservoir mounts mount it off the radiator. And we get about 135 millimeters. So that gives us an extra 10 millimeters gap, which is absolutely perfect. And you also need to consider that the pump and reservoir config is going to be centered in the middle of the radiator. So it doesn't actually matter if it comes a long way forward, although the graphics cards do come out to about here. So it's going to be a tight fit, but it's definitely going to fit. Now that we know the components are going to fit, we need to take a look at the effect this mod is going to have on the structural integrity of the case. Because obviously if you remove a vital part of the case, it's going to either completely fall apart or be very, very weak. Now, if we remove this panel, the only real effect it's going to have is on the strength of the case this way. Because you can see where it's riveted here in the corners, if we don't have something, in between keeping it square, it can quite easily move this way. But we have a number of things stopping that. We have the power supply cover, but even more importantly around the back we have the entire motherboard tray. And the motherboard tray doesn't just stop here like it does in a lot of cases. It goes right around here and all the way down the front. So this case has plenty of strength. Removing that panel is really not going to have an effect on structural integrity at all. It will a little bit, but it's still going to be plenty strong enough. You're actually better off drilling straight down, so I'd be better off right now putting the case on its back down on the ground somewhere, but for the sake of filming I have to keep it up here. It gets a little bit difficult when the rivet starts spinning like that, and you can actually avoid that by putting a little bit more downward pressure and a little bit more speed into the drill. So what I do when that happens is just twist it a little bit, like that. That's it. I think it's still there. Gone. So, we are marking the case a little bit where the rivet head was, but there's nothing you can really do about that. Most of the time it was marked anyway from when the rivet was put in there. So that's all the way down the front. Now there's a couple on the bottom, I would say, under the case foot and the lighting strip here. So I'm going to have to remove both of those, and I'd say it's probably also connected here to the power supply cover, and that might be a little bit hard for us to get into. Okay, that's good. It is connected there, but by a screw, so that's easy. There's 2 more rivets to go, and it's out. So let's remove these components off the bottom of the case here. So as you can see, a simple 10-minute mod has completely opened up this case for a high-end water cooling system. Not only will the reservoir now be visible, it will also drastically improve the aesthetics because the build is going to look less cramped without that panel there in the way. We have a lot of room now in the front area of the case. Now you can't install fans on the outside of the front panel. There's not enough room inside the front panel cover. So the fans have to go on the inside. So I'm going to say up to a 60mm thick radiator with a set of 25mm fans, you'll be able to install a tube reservoir with a pump and res config. But if you were to install the reservoir somewhere else, you could install an alpha core monster with push-pull fans. There's plenty of room in the front there. Now we haven't lost really any structural integrity. I mean, we've lost a little bit. There's a tiny bit of twist, but there's plenty of cases with far more twist than that. You know, we've been able to keep the power supply cover, which is a really important feature and important part of the design for this case, which is awesome. You know, it really cleans things up, covers up the cables nicely. So it's definitely a nice little mod. And I actually just had an idea. Turn this case around and you can see we basically have the same gap here. So you could even cut a section out of the rear side panel and have the reservoir visible also through the rear side panel. So just another possibility there. But I'm not going to be test fitting now. If you want to see the test fitting and how this build turns out, you'll need to check out the Client Build 21 build log. That sums up this video. I'm going to continue the case mods with the side panel window mod in SC Modding Episode 7. Remember, if you enjoy our content, it can make a huge difference if you subscribe and like the videos. Also check the video description for other ways that you can help to grow the channel. Thanks for watching.